Inside the Commons, one MEP whose party is rattling the cage from the outside. Sir Nicholas Soames, until last fortnight a Conservative member, some 27 years. Hilary Benn for Labour, who brought the anti-no deal legislation. And Claire Fox of the Brexit Party joins us from Brussels. Sir Nicholas Soames, are you relieved not to be a Conservative tonight? Would you rejoin?
No, I'm not relieved. And I'm very sorry that a Conservative Prime Minister seems to have forgotten the most important dictum of politics, that be you ne'er so high, the law is yet above you. I think this judgment is absolutely devastating. I think it reaffirms the sovereignty of Parliament as if it needed reaffirming. And I think it's now time for Parliament to be brave and bold and do what Rory Stewart said. Reach out. It needs the Prime Minister to stop running away from all this and provide some real leadership to reach out across the aisle, across all parties, and come to a conclusion probably based on an existing withdrawal agreement.
Would you still rejoin the party after all this?
Well, if I was asked to do so, I would certainly consider it. I don't like not being in my natural home.
Brave and bold. John McDonnell has said it's up to Conservatives to replace their own Prime Minister. Do you think that's right? No,
I want the Prime Minister to carry on and do the job properly. And I want him to get back and stop doubling down on everything, face the situation as it is, reach out across the aisle, reach a compromise agreement, which the last Prime Minister should have done, and get this job done in the way that Rory Stewart said.
He's a zombie. He's thrown you out of the party and you're saying, double down, sorry that you broke the law, get back in there and I'll come back.
I'm not saying that I want him to double down. I don't want him to double down. I want him to get back into Parliament and I want him to do what he's meant to do, which is to make the Conservative Party get a deal.
Let me ask this. Do you have any confidence that he will do what he's meant to do? Do you think that's what you see from him tonight when he says he doesn't really agree with the ruling?
I think it's going to be very difficult, and I don't think he's in any position to say that he doesn't agree with the ruling. This is a judgment from the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom.
Hilary Benn, a vote of no confidence. It's so obvious, isn't it, from your leader?
Well, as Jeremy's always said, the time to bring a vote of no confidence is when you think you are going to succeed. I mean, listening to Boris Johnson in New York today, it was like he hadn't read the judgment and didn't understand the significance of it.
But that's an extraordinary thing to say. I mean, what an open goal. You've had a Prime Minister who's literally been accused of being unlawful and of lying to the Queen. You're saying that he couldn't succeed?
Well, it depends whether the votes are there in Parliament and whether people like Nick would vote to have no confidence in Boris Johnson. But the crisis facing the country is to do with Brexit. And the reason we need to be back at work tomorrow, and I'm glad that we will be, is we can ask the Prime Minister, well, what is it that you are proposing to the European Union to replace the backstop? I wrote to him on the 16th of September and said, you promised to bring forward proposals long before the end of the 30-day deadline that Mrs Merkel had set. That deadline has passed. Parliament is none the wiser, apart from what we read in the newspapers about what it is that he is seeking.
But if he's misled the Queen, of course he's going to ignore a letter from you, Hilary Benn. I mean, isn't the truth that even at this point, you don't trust that your leader can win an election? That's why you can't even have an election.
No, that is not the case. The person we don't trust is Boris Johnson. That's why we had to legislate, Emily, to bind him up. We actually had to put in the bill the words he would have to use in the letter that he will need to write on the 19th of October if he doesn't bring back a deal.
You think he will?
Well, I think he has no choice but to abide by the law. And having been comprehensively found today in this extraordinary and historic Supreme Court judgment, because what they said was no government can send Parliament away for as long as it likes. And that's why it will reverberate through history, because if any government thought it could, and it's astonishing that Boris Johnson thought he could get away with it, the court told him, no, you can't.
You weren't in the room for Jeremy Corbyn's conference speech this afternoon. Do you, hand on heart, want him to be our next Prime Minister?
I do.
And you think he will be the one that will pull you out of this mess now?
Well, the first thing he will do, if there were to be a new Prime Minister still in this Parliament, the first thing he would guarantee to do is to write the letter. Here we are having a discussion tonight. You're asking me, do I think that Boris Johnson will uphold the law that we have passed and write the letter? He spent the last 3 weeks going up and down the country saying, I am not applying for an extension. I mean, this is a Prime Minister who has no mandate, no plan, no credibility, and it seems to me no majority and no respect for the rule of law.
Let me go to Claire Fox. Do you believe that he will stick to his pledge and not ask for that extension to the Brexit deadline?
It doesn't seem likely to me that we will be leaving on the 31st of October, I have to say. Not because in this instance he's not going to stick with the pledge, as in Boris Johnson, but because of what has happened today and, in fact, what had happened prior. But I think it's interesting that, you know, we've just had a Labour MP saying that they legislated in order to bind up the Prime Minister. And then, actually, we wonder why we've got a constitutional crisis. Here we have MPs and Parliament saying they don't trust the Prime Minister. They're going to stop him being able to act as somebody who runs the country. I'm no Tory, but I do happen to think the government should be allowed to govern. And then have gone to, a number of MPs, gone off to the courts to get them to legislate. I mean, this scares me. Well, not that Boris Johnson told a lie or that he prorogued, which I didn't agree with.
So let me just...
But that we have Parliament acting against... And by the way, the one group that nobody's mentioned is, guess what, the voters. I mean, well, the authority of those people is the voters and the people, and they're excluded because they won't go to a general election.
The authority tonight was the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. Yeah, do you agree with Rees-Mogg, who reportedly called this a constitutional coup? Are you saying you don't think the Prime Minister did break the law?
No, I think, first of all, I don't think it's a matter of the law in relation to this. I think that there was a serious problem here in terms of a judicial power grab. I think they have brought upon themselves a whole slew of new powers that I get anxious about. But the main thing is that if the judicial review can make decisions about the future of the country, they're even further removed, because they're unelected, from the power where it should be. The authority for what happens in Parliament and of that government, historically, philosophically, in our tradition, in terms of any Enlightenment thinking or any of the ideas that come about constitutional law, come from the people. And, you know, John Locke said it far better than I and many of the philosophers.
I can see Hilary Benn is shaking his head. So I'm
sure he is, but
I'm going to bring him in for a second.
And then I'll come back on him afterwards.
You can.
I was just going to say, I don't see how anyone can say that the court's ruling that parliamentarians should be able to do their job, to be in Parliament, to hold the government to account. This is not about whether people voted leave or remain. This should concern everyone who worries about the nature of our democracy, because what the Prime Minister did was to send us away for 5 weeks without justification. That's what the court said. And the really important principle that's been established is if they tried it for longer or on another occasion without a good reason, the court has said they can't do that. And surely we want our Parliament to be sitting.
I said I'd go back to you, Claire, because you made this about Brexit, about a vote and about the people, whereas we all know, because Boris Johnson told us repeatedly, this was nothing to do with Brexit, this was just about a Queen's speech.
I've just told you that I didn't support the proroguing that Boris did. I thought it was a stupid idea and I didn't think it was democratic. But just when you say it's not about Brexit, he, you know, Joanna Cherry, Gina Miller, Caroline Lucas, Anna Soubry, Joe Morn, what have they all got in common? You know, Hilary Benn, everybody just talked about Brexit. This was about, and this still remains to be about, an establishment at all levels who have never agreed with the decision of the referendum in 2016 and have gone to great lengths. And these are people who are actively Remainers, some of them saying that they would even revoke Article 50, which, by the way, isn't constitutional, it seems to me, certainly not democratic. And they then say, we disapprove. We only went to the Supreme Court, they say. Oh, we only went because we care about the law. Do me a favour. We know that's not what this is about. This is a culture war, and it's around whether you support that referendum result being enacted or not. Boris Johnson, I don't think I trust to deliver it, but
Claire Fox.
The reason they don't like him is because he's trying to at least deliver some kind of a Brexit.
Let me just finish with Nicholas Soames. At this point, you have an extraordinarily optimistic view of what Boris Johnson can achieve as your Conservative Prime Minister. What would shake that now if everything we've heard from the Supreme Court won't budge?
Well, I mean, I really believe that what this most significant constitutional judgment in modern history says is it reaffirms the sovereignty of Parliament. And it means that sovereignty, Parliament has to exert now its authority. It has to be brave and bold, and the Prime Minister has to reach out, because there isn't any other way, across the aisle to seek a compromise. And I believe that he will try and do so, because I think he has nowhere else to go.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Around the world, we know of hundreds of stranded British travellers. One of the few to be repatriated against his own preferences is one Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister. He was at the UN General Assembly in New York when the news from the Supreme Court broke. He's heading home tonight, but David Grossman caught up with him and joins me from there now. David,